Hello everyone, welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. Today I have a video that I have not done in a long time, and I have it all broken down right here. Now, every topic I'm going to talk about, we go into extreme detail on a lot of this. Let me straighten this out a little bit. There we go. If you go to the playlist section, and you can go through all these, so you can find playlists talking about exposures, breaking down acceptance in detail, moving with uncertainty, wearing anxiety like an uncomfortable coat, a lot of the OCD myths. But I want to title this video, and there's no way to encompass this video even if it was 2 hours long, but I just want to kind of give you a background about it, is how to recover from OCD. Now, before I go any further, please share, like the video. It helps with the algorithm. This is a very important video that I would like to get out there. I'm going to break down different practical applications that you can apply to your life and start kind of working towards actually bringing down the core fear, doing exposures when necessary, and wearing anxiety like an uncomfortable coat. So the first thing I want to talk about is understanding what OCD is and what OCD is not. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the books on the reading list. Now, there are 6 books on the reading list. So we have How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable and The Myth of Self-Esteem, both by Dr. Albert Ellis. Really good for breaking down the principles of unconditional self-life, other acceptance, why having a more emotive behavioral approach to changing things in your life is key. Then we have Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, world-renowned best-selling book, breaking down his experience in the Holocaust, losing his family, coming out to invent logotherapy, just a great book. Then we have Claire Weeks' Self-Help for Your Nerves and Paul David's At Last a Life. Those books show you how to wear physical symptoms of anxiety, kind of more of where the thoughts approach can kind of be applicable to creating distance with some of the sensations, but usually not enough, well, almost always not enough for the chronic OCD format, but can definitely be used in context. But, when you're really fused with, say, harm OCD or POCD, you can't just tell yourself you're a good person over and over again. And with those self-reassurance statements like thoughts or thoughts usually becomes compulsive. We're going to talk about all that. And then Marcus Aurelius' Meditation, because REBT, the principles that we use from REBT and apply to ourselves as OCD sufferers or anxiety-based sufferers, those come from Stoicism and stuff like that. And Stoicism is it's a great philosophical outlook for looking at perspectives in life in a very rational manner. So the second thing you want to understand is the practicality of OCD. And what I mean by practicality, I mean about relapses and setbacks and backdoor spikes, and how it morphs and shifts and will make you think you've not made any progress. And 1 minute you'll feel amazing, and the next minute you'll feel horrible. This has happened to me thousands, tens of thousands of times, where I've had multiple good hours of what I thought was no symptoms and thought OCD was gone, to only turn the corner in my house and have it all come back like a floodgate that's open during, at a battlefield, and the water's just flushing out into the battlefield. That's kind of what it felt like for me, and that could have been in the morning or night and all over the place. Now, what you don't need to know, and it is cool to study, is the neurophysiology and neuroanatomy. We don't have to know about the dopamine, serotonin balance. The chemical imbalance theory is completely outdated. It's not substantial by any means. We know this because if people take medications, and medications can help save lives, but they don't change your beliefs. It is important to say that. Then if the chemical imbalance was fixed, the person would not only be recovered, they would be immediately cured, like walking through a door, but we know that's not the case. Again, medications are great. Always speak to your prescribing physician. Now, again, we don't have to know anything about the prefrontal cortex or anything about the limbic system or anything with neurophysiology and neuroanatomy. Again, you could look it up, but if you're in the desperate search to figure out what's going on, it's something that we don't actually need to do, and it holds a lot of sufferers back. The last thing I want to talk about with the first point, understanding about what you need to know about OCD or not, is, do you need a diagnosis? No, having a diagnosis can be good, but if you're compulsively searching, you'll never find the answer you're looking for. If you imagine you have OCD in the chronic format, you more than likely already know. And it's good to have a community. It's why we do this. The Facebook group has 17,000 members. I'm very, very active in the community. I make lots of TikToks, Instagram Reels, YouTube videos. I mean, I've made over 200 YouTube videos. Tens and tens of hours of content for all of you, because I know what it's like to be chronically stuck and know what it's like to have no hope, being in the mental hospital and stuff like that. So this is all really, really important to me. Again, getting a diagnosis, there's nothing wrong with it. I have a diagnosis, but I don't ever think about it. In compulsively searching for a diagnosis can be a problem. So that's the opening part. The second thing I want to talk about is exposures, when they're necessary and when they're not. Now, there's a lot of people saying the principles from ERP and exposing yourself and then preventing yourself from going down the compulsive road is something that is absolutely needed for OCD, and this is a misconception. We know this is a misconception because we see it all the time where people can actually chase exposures and they're looking for relief, and that kind of that dire search for relief is what kind of holds a lot of people back. So exposures need a balance. Certain fears, if there's outward, say, magical thinking, ritualistic behaviors such as flipping light switches, pouring water in and out of glasses and doing stuff like that, that will need to be brought down by an exposure hierarchy. If you're doing it for yourself, or maybe you're working with someone who understands OCD. I did not add that into the first part, but working with someone who understands OCD is extremely important. Unfortunately, OCD is still very much in the dark, and a lot of people can be getting reassurance for years. A lot of people I've worked with who have been told that exposures can't become compulsive. Anything can become compulsive. Disputing your irrational beliefs can become compulsive. It's why we talk about balance so much. So when you look at sensory motor, what I suffered with really bad, one of the biggest misconceptions is thinking that you need to outwardly expose yourself to your sensations. And whilst this is understandable, it's something we don't actually need to do. When we are actually exposing ourselves to our sensations, and this is not about bringing down avoidance behaviors and working on the core fear, we're usually doing it with the intent of hoping we'll habituate and it will go away. I work with enough sensory motor sufferers. It's something I've recovered from. It's something I know very, very, very well. And I know what is compulsive and what is not. I know why sensory motor sufferers stay stuck. And I can see it within 120 seconds of speaking to someone for the first time. So it's pretty easy. So, harm OCD, hiding knives, certain types of POCD, existential OCD, if you're not watching certain things related about death and the unknown. So some things, a lot of things do need outward exposures. Contamination OCD definitely can't recover, in my opinion, from chronic contamination OCD without some outward exposures, but not necessary for all fears. So a big misconception. The third thing I want to talk about is the importance of uncertainty and wearing anxiety like an uncomfortable coat. So the books on the reading list, Paul David's The Last of Life and then Claire Week's Self-Help for Your Nerves, as I said, are really applicable to these two particular subcategories of what you need to do to get better. Now, a lot of people forget that we say wear anxiety like an uncomfortable coat, but what that actually means, and when we say wear anxiety like an uncomfortable coat, it's quick, it can kind of be catchy, and it comes across clean. The reality is what we mean is wear anxiety, intrusive thoughts, intrusive sensations, images, urges, rumination thoughts, all of that at any time, at any point, all throughout your journey, no matter if it's up, down, relapses, backdoor spikes. So you have to wear all discomfort. You'll more than likely need to stop asking questions about every single time you have a new symptom. That's absolutely key and kind of compulsive. Every time people have new symptoms, they come into the Facebook group and forums. It's understandable because it feels very real. It feels like you're sitting on this table and the room's burning down around you. So I understand what that feels like, but you're going to have to allow yourself to feel that discomfort, have your anxiety spike, and then not talk about all your symptoms in a compulsive venting and confession manner. So that's really, really important. Now, I want to talk about rumination for a few minutes because rumination is something that's covered incorrectly, and I think it's something that keeps a lot of sufferers stuck. If you're compulsively tracking your rumination day by day, that will more than likely need to stop. You don't have to track your rumination in your OCD recovery process in that manner. The manner you want to track your recovery is by looking back 6-9 months down the road and thinking, wow, I came a long way. I'm no longer in the mental hospital. I run a business. I work with OCD recovery. I go hiking. I've recovered from sensory motor. Haven't fully recovered from OCD yet, but I still have some things that linger, but it doesn't really matter because I'm living life completely on my own terms. And I can actually accept fully that I'm not at robust recovery yet. Sensory motor I am, but other things I'm not. And that's actually really important to cover because when you don't have the realistic perspective of where you are in the recovery journey, it can really downplay the reality of what acceptance actually is in an unconditional life manner. So you can't just bring down rumination day by day. You can't just tell yourself to not ruminate. Rumination is primarily automatic. I'm not talking about sitting down on the couch and going out there and analyzing something that may or may not have happened at dinner. I'm talking about that rumination that's happening automatically. Our OCD sufferer example is the one I always use. if you're afraid of never feeling connection or being in the wrong relationship, and then you're at dinner and all those ruminations start coming in. If you're like, I'm going to sit down and now analyze it, you could stop that quickly. But the automatic rumination that's happening, which is probably arbitrarily 80, 90, sometimes 100% of the time, it's very automatic. It feels as if a machine gun is shooting at you, just rumination. You'll have to wear that like an uncomfortable coat while the fear comes down. OCD sufferers usually tend to understand the disorder really well. So when they're being told they can just bring down rumination and they're saying that's not how it works, and then they're being told that they're doing it wrong, I'm telling you, you're not doing it wrong. You're actually, unfortunately, the advice out there is still in the dark age. A lot of people who are telling you to bring it down in that manner, I don't think quite understand what rumination is. It's just part of the deal. OCD is not easy to understand. I know very, very, very few people that truly understand OCD and the unconditional self-acceptance, life, other acceptance, how to wear anxiety like an uncomfortable coat, moving with uncertainty, put the time and effort in, many ups and downs. So it's not nearly as simple as, say, TikTok and some social media accounts and YouTube accounts will make it out to be. If it was, we would all recover and I wouldn't have to make hundreds of videos for you, which I do love doing. The fourth thing I want to talk about is figuring out what works and what does not. So we already talked about how exposures can become compulsive. They certainly can become compulsive. I've talked to people who have left facilities that did 8 weeks of outpatient exposures after exposures. And I said, do you think you were chasing relief? They said, absolutely, but this is never discussed. You don't need to do 8 hours of exposures a day. That's absolutely overkill. Only in certain scenarios do you really have to be very strict about your hierarchy. Sometimes contamination OCD, harm OCD, people haven't left the house in years. This needs to be started in a smaller manner than brought up. I see you're not going to put someone who hasn't left the house 5 years with POCD and then drop them into their biggest exposure. They're going to shit their pants, freak the fuck out, and then nothing's actually going to be accomplished. So it's important to say that. I like how I said that. Reassurance. In the practical sense, in 99.9, the way we think, medication reassurance questions, I understand why we ask, because the side effects can be scary. Has anyone else experienced this? Am I the only one who experienced this? How long does it take to recover? Having a practical sense of like the recovery process is good, but 99.999% of the questions that OCD people are asking, looking for certainty, should be classified as reassurance, because we don't need to know the answer for that right now. Again, after you get the diagnosis and find the community, because people will say, well, that is reassurance. Understand where you're coming from, but people who understand what we're talking about when you're looking for that certainty and dire need, matching of symptoms will need to be brought down. So mantras and reassurance statements, so telling yourself over and over again that you're a good person, screaming that you're not a serial killer when you're absolutely convinced that you are one, is not going to work long term. Unconditional self-life, other acceptance, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about, will need to be applied to some degree. If it didn't need to be applied, and you could just move with uncertainty and just kind of thoughts, which does work for some of those milder cases when they really don't have like the light switch moment. I was driving, had the light switch moment, chronically latched with OCD. My life changed forever. So that was definitely a huge part of that. That was very, very tough for me. Constantly changing your meds and constantly changing people who are helping you. The other thing that doesn't work either is absolutely changing, going from I'm feeling okay to leaving all forums, leaving all groups. You don't have to stay in forums forever, and you don't have to help people. That's not an obligation in your life, but it's not about the leaving and discontinuing, not working with them, or being in forums, or being in the WhatsApp groups, or never coming in for webinars, or never seeing the person you're working with again. It's the way you're doing it. You're doing it automatically, in the moment, 24/7, gone, not coming back. Again, you do not have to work with OCD if you don't want to. I enjoy doing it. I'll do it for the rest of my life. It's very important for me because of how in the dark OCD still is in 2022, which I can accept because it's not an easy order to understand. And then forcing acceptance, which we're going to talk about in a second. So the fifth thing I want to talk about is the missing key. Unconditional self-life, other acceptance, laid out by the founder, Dr. Albert Ellis, who is considered by Psychology Today and many other platforms as the most influential psychologist in the last 120 years, even more influential than Sigmund Freud. In my opinion, more influential than Freud, Jung, Adler, all of them, B.F. Skinner. All these people are terrific. I've read a lot of their works, but I think Ellis really encapsulated everything, all the good of the id, the ego, and the superego from Freud, everything about acceptance from Jung, behavioral stuff from B.F. Skinner, applying that, Karen Horney with the tyranny of the musts, taking that all together, encapsulating it, putting it into this one area of writing over 70 books. So, How to Stubbornly Refuse and the Myth of Self-Esteem, very good for unconditional self-life, other acceptance. I'm going to be very honest with you. I would have not have recovered from sensory motor OCD if I wouldn't have approached it with unconditional life acceptance. Now remember, sensory motor doesn't really need a bunch of unconditional self-acceptance because of more life acceptance, because you're not having that chronic guilt and shame. It's not the way you look at it, like I'm a terrible person because I'm hyper aware of my breathing. You think if you notice your sensations for the rest of your life will be ruined. It's very understandable why you think that. I thought that for a long time. Understanding humans are fallible, and this principle applies to many different things. I see people look at people who've committed horrendous acts and looking at them and saying, I would never do that if I was them. More than likely you would have, if you've had their brain, their genetics, their upbringing, exactly the way they are, their perspectives and their outlooks, their behavioral actions, you more than likely would have committed all the heinous acts. You can't just look at someone who's done atrocious things and think, I would never do that if I were them. That is not that's an irrational statement because we don't know if you would have or not. And the chances are, statistically speaking, breaking down some of the stuff by Sam Harris with free will and stuff like that, you probably would have done it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is time and patience. Now, no guidelines for OCD. It's not like, oh, most people graduate high school at 18, some at 17, some at 19. When you have a fracture in your leg, compound fracture in your bone sticking out of your leg, usually 6 to 12 months, common cold 7 to 10 days. OCD recovery is not like that. I have to be very honest with you. I've never really seen anyone fully recovered robustly in under a year. That doesn't mean that you can't make extreme progress by the 12-month time frame. I was living life on my terms, wasn't fully recovered from sensory motor, bringing it with me, living life on my terms, building a business, doing a bunch of really cool stuff. But I was still in not the best place, and that's really important to talk about because it will seem like, sometimes you'll have really good moments and you'll think that you haven't recovered and stuff like that. And that's absolutely key. So time and patience is very important. Realizing that we can't force acceptance. I wish we could, I wish I could tell people this is how you force acceptance, but that's not how it looks or not how it is. It's a being, not a doing. And that's really important to cover. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this blueprint. Again, don't look at this as like, a step-by-step process. I'm kind of just breaking down some of the things that we apply to people in the webinars and the one-to-one coaching and stuff like that. So it is really important. We always have a bunch of great webinars coming up. We have HOCD acceptance webinars, sensory motor webinars. Every few months, we do a OCD recovery part 1, 2, 3. So it is really cool to break this stuff down. Don't forget to subscribe, like that video, share it, get it out there. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree with me, disagree with me. I'm up for a good conversation in the comments section. I think being active with all of you in the OCD community is very important. And it means a lot because I know what it's like to think that there's no hope and that you can't get better, but you can. As always, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.